Welcome to Romance Studies 202, Literature and Culture from Modernism to the Present. And today I'm very pleased indeed to be talking to Professor Ben Bollig. He is a professor of Latin American literature and film and also tutor in Spanish in St. Catherine's College, Oxford, and has written extensively on particularly Argentine literature, culture, poetry, fiction, and is the co-editor of Latin American Cultural Studies, a reader. Ben, if I may, thank you so much for your time. We're going to be talking today about this book, Mad Toy, by the Argentine author Roberto Arlt. Two Spanish editions there. And my opening question, how would you approach this book?
Thanks, John. Thanks for the invitation as well, and also for inspiring me to go back and reread a novel, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, and I think that the way I think about this initially is from the point of view of literary genre, which is what sort of book have we got here? And it's very much a hybrid text. And so as you read it, although it's a very short novel, there's a lot packed in, and there's a lot of types of novel. So it's in these four parts, but each part essentially is in and of itself a different type of novel, and within those different types of novel, there's a variety of genres here. So it's kind of a picaresque. And if you think, what does the picaresque do? The picaresque takes us on a journey through society, often satirically, and we see how through the different jobs or the different masters that the picaro has, different parts of society are portrayed and often satirized. And that kind of happens here through the way Astier has these different roles and these different jobs. It's also a kind of social realist novel as well. There's actually a lot about it that's a really, vivid and really detailed portrait of Buenos Aires, Argentina in the 1910s, and this incredibly dynamic, fluid, changing city. Is Argentina's been radically changed by migration, particularly European migration, growth of the working class, new trades, new professions, new unions, new political parties. So it's kind of a social realist novel as well. But also, it's got all these really colourful characters who wouldn't at all be out of place in Dickens. Characters like El Rengo, for example. There's various characters who are mean or who are in some way kind of physically distinctive. They're often kind of quite uncharitably portrayed, but they're certainly very memorable. So yeah, I think the first thing I'd think about is the way in which this is very much it's a hybrid, it's a mix of different styles and different genres. Um, and that as you're reading it, you're kind of getting multiple novels, multiple genres, all within, within one book.
This is great. There's so much here. You talk about the characters, of course, perhaps the principal characters, the narrator, this young adolescent Silvio Astier. He's 14 in the first chapter. We see him. We see him trying to find a place for himself, I suppose, in this, as you say, rapidly changing society. And he's a kid still, although he's being forced out into the world at a relatively young age. His mother sort of basically says, "Get off! You need to have a job." I wonder if you could say a little bit more about Silvio, and perhaps also we were talking about this earlier about this being a book about youth, about young people, or a young person in particular.
Yeah, so Al drew a lot on his own experiences, even to the surname, the fact that they've got this surname that's very difficult to pronounce, Astier, Alt, that they're not criollo, they're not Argentine Spanish names. They're surnames that very much represent this big influx of European migration. And Art himself talked about, and his characters talk about this desire to make a name for oneself, which is to say that if you have a name that doesn't fit in, that doesn't belong to a patrician family or anything like that, that you have to find success in one or another field so that people actually, know your name and pronounce your name. But yeah, as you say, he's a kid, he's a teenager, but he's forced into the world of adulthood because of financial necessity. Because like many of this new emerging members of the new emerging working class in Argentina, they can't rely on inherited wealth. They can't rely necessarily on the support of the state. So they've got to go and look for a job. And part of what this story tells is a series of failures, which is to say, he starts with that that most honourable of professions, which is thieving. So he starts as a criminal, and that fails. And then he tries in the in the book profession, or he's a paper seller, and that fails. And then he decides that he's going to sign up for the army, and there he's dismissed for having too many ideas. And so that journey, of, I suppose, sort of disillusionment, isn't it? It's here are all the promises. So, so you can, if you work hard, if you get a job, if you sign up for the army, you can go and you can become you can become someone, you can make a name for yourself. And so part of the process of his growing up is this process of disillusionment, and this discovery that all of these promises that society makes him actually turn out to be lies, turn out to be false. And so that's what leads up to, I guess, his development as a character, Astier's development as a character, and in the end, the denouement of the novel and the decision that he makes, what he does to eventually, what he finds, what he feels himself forced to do to get ahead in this particular society. And it also, a lot of the other characters, some of the maybe more disagreeable bits of the novel are these portraits of some of his, again, very vivid but often slightly distasteful characters. So there's a kind of teenage element to this in terms of the characters, as well as the way it's narrated. So yeah, absolutely. It is a novel about adolescence and about growing up, but avoiding a lot of the cliches that we associate. It's not a Bildungsroman. It's not a novel of development in the traditional sense. It's not, kind of how I made my fortune, how I made my name. Or wait, it kind of is, but in the denouement of the novel, in a surprising way.
And I want to pick up on the name bit for just 1 second. I think you've mentioned this, but to say it again, these are signs that this modernity, this rapid growth in Buenos Aires, is in large part a product of immigration, and so it's because these are foreign names, right? These are names that are not Criollo, as you said, are not Spanish names. They reflect the diversity of the, I don't know, I would say multitude that is emerging in Buenos Aires at this period. But back to
Yeah.
SJ a little bit, and yeah, this notion that he's trying to find a place for himself, make a name for himself, and this series of failures. I mean, he's caught, isn't he? Or this is one aspect of his personality. He's caught between a kind of a literary interest. I mean, we start with this brief little anecdote that an Andalusian, another immigrant, an Andalusian cobbler has introduced him to the world of reading. And on
Mm.
the other hand, he's got this interest in science and inventions. I mean, this is what he proposes to the army. You said the army gets rid of him because he has too many ideas. But there's this sort of interest in, yeah, in invention, in technology, in these new apparatuses. I wonder that, yeah, that I'm interested in that split, but it's also complementary between literary invention, perhaps, and technological invention.
Yeah, it's absolutely there, and it reflects Art's own interests. I mean, he was eventually by profession he was a journalist, but also he was a novelist, short story writer, wrote for the theatre, very polyphacetic, but also an inventor as well. And he had a number of patents. Um, it's this period that the term that Bedri Sarlo and others have used, this idea of the sort of technical imagination. So it's a time when people could be amateur scientists. There's a lot of kind of popular science publications and popular science information out there. to enable you to go and in your back room, or if you've got a shed or a galpon, kind of some sort of space to go and come up with inventions and try and patent them and try and make money. I suppose ultimately in art, the fantasy is to make money. It's almost like it's also sort of alchemistic. It's either through alchemy or through falsification. So one of the characters, one of his friends, is a really good falsifier. He's very good at imitating stamps, and that ability to make money out of nothing, either through science or through counterfeiting, is one of the ways that characters can escape poverty. But yeah, the background here is one in which there's this, you use the term multitude. I think that's quite a good term to talk about this emerging working class, which is in the case of Astier and also Arlt himself, is struggling to get ahead and struggling to find its place. And so one of the promises, I suppose, of the liberal state in the start of the 20th century is that there's going to be employment for people. And that's through, for example, the growth of the civil service, the growth of the bureaucracy, and that was one of the ways in which the liberal state that emerges in Argentina in the 1910s tries to find a place for the new immigrant class. Um, but what Astier discovers is that actually that doesn't really work, and so he's pushed, or he goes in two different directions. One is through literary invention. He's really drawn to both the sort of the popular fictions of people like Rocambole, Ponson du Terrail, the author, but also the poetry of Baudelaire, the poetry. Lugones is kind of there in the background somewhere. Um, Leopoldo Lugones, the Argentine poet, but then also drawn towards science and invention. And what does he discover is that actually his attempts to make it as a writer, well, it turns out that this sort of dandy figure who promises to take him under his wing actually just dismisses him. And the one place where he thinks that they must need people with a technical imagination, with scientific ideas, which is in the military. Again, that turns out to be a dead end, and he's thrown out before he's even got his first stripe.
Yeah, this is all fantastic. We're coming towards the end. I want first of all actually to pick up on the question of invention. It seems to be a very Argentine way of approaching that. This sort of idea that in your shed you can come up with something. You've no doubt seen or read the comic El Etonauta, which was recently turned into a TV series on Netflix. And this is a sort of post-apocalyptic science fiction thing, but they sort of construct again in the garage or out of stuff that they have, so diving suit. They sort of construct the technology, the suit that they need in order to weather this apocalyptic storm from whatever it is. But again, it's that Argentines can, with a bit of sort of nous, and know-how, and put things together and come up with what they need, which I think is kind of interesting. But I wanted, maybe as the last question, that we could talk about the theme of betrayal. And it seems to me, again, picking up on something you've been saying, there's a sort of double betrayal. On the one hand, Silvio Astier, and insofar as he's representative of other young men like him or other immigrant families like his, is betrayed in some sense by these promises from the liberal state, of modernity, and so on, that they can, progress and flourish. And on the other hand, he also becomes he becomes a betrayer. The last chapter is called Judas Iscariot, and then we were before we started recording, we were talking about this word delatar, and that's also in the what do you call it, epigraph to the whole book, which in the Spanish is "Si se delata a Roberto Arlt." So there's something about the author's own betrayal, or what betrays the author. I wonder if you could talk a little about that topic or theme.
Yeah, of course. There's two terms really. One was delatar, which is delation, and it's not a very good word in English, but I suppose we would say, I don't know if this is used universally, but we'd say to snitch or to dob someone in. So it's to give information about somebody that you're meant to keep secret. So it's a betrayal of trust. And in this case, it's a particularly pointed betrayal because it's this character El Ringo, who's his man with a limp, who he describes as the most noble man I've ever known. So the reference to Judith Iscariot, the reference to this kind of the nobility of this character, there are these biblical references, biblical undertones, and so in a sense, he's driven to commit this what for him is a kind of terrible moral crime. But actually, what he's doing, in a sense, is playing by the rules. He has information about a crime, and he hands that information over to the authorities. And so if you think back to one of his earliest escapades, is as attempting to make his way as a burglar, as a thief, and then towards the end of the novel, he ends up betraying someone who's in that profession. But it's particularly this kind of very noble character. And at the same time, also the other idea is this idea of is treason. That in a sense, what he's doing, he's not just giving away the secrets on an individual level that result in the downfall of the person he most admires, but also in a sense, he's kind of betraying the nation state by revealing that ultimately it rests on dishonesty, on falsity, and yeah, and the way to get ahead is through low acts. It's through kind of kanasheka. It's kind of being a real heel. Being a really low character. And that's how ultimately you get ahead in this society. So there's a really on the individual level, we see a character who suffers through this sort of sense of having been betrayed, of having been let down by all the promises of this new nation that's emerging in the early 20th century. But at the same time, also then to get ahead, um, is forced to commit a betrayal and a really kind of particularly low act as well. So that's, I think, that's the real emotional punch that the novel carries at the end without giving away too much.
Well, we're out of time now. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts on Roberto Arlt's Mad Toy.
And thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a real pleasure.